Welcome to the Warning Track Power Hour. I am Dr. Andrew Scaff. He is Dr. Michael Werman, Esquire. Today, we'll talk about the continuing NFL playoffs. We've got the completion now of the division round, and we'll have a preview for the conference championship round coming up this weekend. We'll talk a little bit more about our betting competition that is now getting extremely close for the playoff season. And we'll talk a little bit about Major League Baseball and the Hall of Fame selection that happened just a few hours ago for us. Mike, we normally start the show when I ask you something about if anything from the last weekend's NFL action was surprising, but this week we agreed on all of our picks, and we were correct in all the games. So I don't think we really need to ask anything about what surprised you from the last weekend. So instead, where is our early mock draft information for this next upcoming NFL draft season? Why do we not already have a mock draft?
We've really dropped the ball on this one. Mock draft season is, I think, more important than playoff season. Next season is always more important. At least when we were following the Royals in their awful years, next year the prospect list was always more. It seemed like it was more important than whatever the standings were that season. I think for a lot of teams, maybe mock draft. It is mock draft season. You know, if you're a Bears fan, if you have the number one overall pick, you're maybe not as concerned about who's going to win the Super Bowl because it's not going to be the Bears this year. You're wondering, well, are we going to pick Caleb Williams or one of the quarterbacks, or are we going to keep Justin Fields and pick, somebody else, Marvin Harrison Jr. or a tackle or somebody like that, or are we going to keep Justin Fields and pick a quarterback at number one anyway, to make it extra weird, and
just to confuse all of the analysts and blow up everybody's boards.
Yeah, so I understand why it's happening, and the draft isn't that far away. I guess it's not like there have been mock drafts that were made actually during the season.
Sure.
By I don't know if Kuiper had any,
but we have not made one.
We haven't made any because we haven't been. Well, we haven't been. If I made a mock draft, it would simply be a composite of other people's mock drafts, which might actually be just as good as doing my own scouting. This is something we've kind of wondered before. Does it pay to actually have a scouting department, or should you simply rely on all the other data and interpret it as well as you think you can based on past results and typical performance and basic stats from college? Do we need to send guys out and measure how fast people are? Is it can we rely simply on other people doing the same thing? Hand size is always a big deal. The Wonderlic test, but those are scores that are reported widely. So at the combine, so you don't even need to do anything. People go to these pro days. They interview people. How much of that helps? How much of that matters? How much of that leads to good picks versus just throwing darts at at the wall? This is I've kind of wondered that would I think we talked about this with the Royals. Would it simply a subscription to Baseball America and looking at their top prospects, picking the best one available? Would that be a better approach than what the Royals are doing or have done? And
yes, if the answer is yes, Mike.
Grades in the mock draft, for your actual draft, the way to get good grades in an actual draft is to draft what the pundits are considering anyway. So like, oh, you picked that guy because I was thinking he was the best player, so that's my A draft because I picked him. So it's and a lot of teams don't do that, but there are also a lot of the teams that don't do that are unsuccessful. So should these? I don't. It's hard to tell. Like but maybe you think, well, do the Mel Kipers and Todd McShays of the world, do they get their data and information from NFL sources, or do they simply look at college players themselves and evaluate? I don't exactly know where
of everything you mentioned, though, I think the thing that may be like most important, probably from what you said, though, is maybe that interview that you could have with the player and the team, that just to make sure that there's like a, a culture fit kind of thing. That may be like, of all the things, everything else, you can find in a, in a website, data library, that but I mean, having that conversation with somebody is maybe the most important thing. I
Or
would
you
think
can
of all
watch
that
on
stuff.
TV. Like is
Yeah.
somebody sitting in the crowd better than just somebody watching film on, like, a scout going, is a scout going to a game
Yeah.
better than somebody who is just watching the game on tape? And maybe in some ways, if you're only paying attention to one guy,
Yeah.
maybe. I don't know. It's one of those things where is old fashioned, do these methods really make a difference? Is it simply tradition that we're locked into, or is there some sort of actual connoisseurship that certain people have that other people don't? You
Yeah.
know, the scout that sees this diamond in the rough that nobody can see based on production or stats or anything else. This is in some ways the Patrick Mahomes story, where supposedly Brett Veach, who was not yet the general manager of the Chiefs, who was just a personnel guy, um, homed in on Mahomes very early and was putting his film out there, and Mahomes was, on his radar, really really early, and Veach wanted to, make sure that John Dorsey, who was the GM at the time, and Andy Reid knew all about him, and things like that. So, you know, so maybe some is eyeball scouting, but you could also say, well, you could look at some of the numbers that Mahomes put up in college, watch the film of Mahomes, and just see some of the things that he did. That, I don't know if you need a great scouting department, but Mahomes was, I think, the consensus third best quarterback after Deshaun Watson and after Mitch Trubisky. So I guess if you followed just the normal scouting measurements, you would have picked Trubisky and then Watson and then Mahomes. Fortunately for the Chiefs, the Bears picked Trubisky, although the Bears supposedly said they were going to pick Mahomes. Did you remember that story? They told Mahomes they were going to pick him, and so
Yeah.
decided to trade up to take Trubisky instead, from number 3 to number 2 or something like that, 4 to 3. One of the, I can't remember exactly what number.
Yeah.
He was number 2 overall. But
Thankfully they did that.
I think that was a story that Patrick Mahomes Senior told, and so in that case, obviously Mahomes was by far the best quarterback choice of that draft.
Oh yeah.
Not, and even Deshaun Watson has shown promise in some good seasons. Obviously, you would not probably want Deshaun Watson on your team.
Not his
Hopefully.
legal history, at least, anyway.
Yeah, unless you're the Cleveland Browns, where you're going to trade for him anyway, despite all that baggage, and still have better success with the 5th quarterback that you picked up this year, Joe Flacco. So
That young buck, Joe Flacco.
you led them to the playoffs, and then performed like Joe Flacco and led them out of the playoffs. And speaking of the playoffs, do you want to talk about the playoffs? Should we get to that rather than talking more about mock drafts? Oh, unless you want, who do you think the Chiefs? Are the Chiefs going to? Are they going to pick a wide? Do you think they're going to pick a wide receiver in the mock draft? Is in the actual draft? Is that who you would pick,
I
or
mean,
would you?
that seems to
Pick
be
the
their
best
biggest
player
need
available?
right now, but we don't. I mean, we don't know who's going to be retained or who they're going to let go in free agency, that kind of thing right now. So, like, as of right now, is what we know. I think, yeah, wide receiver seems to be the biggest need.
Mhm.
But is that what you thought too, or you think they'll
Well,
go
it kind
somewhere
of depends.
anyway?
It depends on a lot of things. Like, well, what do we do? What are we doing with Chris Jones, L'Jarius Sneed?
Yeah,
Guys who are free agents next year, things like that. So, do we need to keep, or whatever else? Also, are we going to do with the free agency? Are we going to pick up, some good? Because it's one of those things where in the Chiefs, for the most part, it takes wide receivers a long time to latch on to the Chiefs system. Rice
me too.
has been a little bit quick, but he's still only caught on like in the last half of the season. So
Yeah.
if you want somebody, a vet, you probably want a veteran. And then maybe you think, okay, well, we got Rice in the second round. Why don't we pick another receiver in the second or third round, and maybe try to get the most impact player that we can find in the first round. But it's hard to say. That the obvious thing would be receiver, but the Chiefs are also picking at least 29th, and possibly 31st or 32nd, depending on what happens if they beat the Ravens. So there might not be the receiver that you want. Maybe they were all early, and you might not be able to trade up that high, and maybe trading down and getting somebody else, or just picking somebody who's not a receiver would be the best course of action. But so yeah, I don't know. Getting conventional wisdom would say they're going to pick wide receiver, but who knows? I would say
it's still way too early to know what they're.
I would say the one position we know they're not going to pick is quarterback in the first round, or kicker. They're not going to pick in the first round. Maybe actually, would you think they'd be more likely to pick a kicker in the first round or a quarterback in the first round if you're the Chiefs?
I mean, unless somebody decided that they were going to retire all of a sudden with then no, Mike.
I think they'd be more likely to pick a quarterback, even though they have Mahomes, than pick a kicker. Simply because you never pick kickers in the first round, because
you wouldn't do that.
First round. Maybe at the end of the draft, maybe you think you have a quarterback, a kind of slash type player who could play. Like if there was a Lamar Jackson type who you thought, well, he could be a good receiver, he could be a good something else. I don't know if you do that with Mahomes still, but that would be more likely than picking a kicker or a punter in the first round.
No,
fullback also probably not going to be picked in the first round.
Yeah, it'd be extremely unlikely to pick any of those positions at all. But yeah, but there'd have to be a reason for them to pick one of those positions, and most of them, there isn't a good one for most of them.
I would say it'd be like $1 million to 1 would be like a kicker in the first round. But I'd say it's
for any team or just the Chiefs.
For the Chiefs, because they already have Harrison Butker, who's really good. And I'd say it's only 1,000 to 1 that they wouldn't pick a quarterback in the first round. That's my
how much are you putting down on that bet right now?
Well, I'd bet on both of them they wouldn't pick either, but I think I would.
Money not well spent, but also not well risked, right? Or not much risk behind it.
No, it's to win like 2 cents out of my $100. Yeah, but speaking of the playoffs and quarterback play, do we want to talk about the week that was? We can go through the games chronologically, like we've done.
Sure.
Recently, and talk about our bets that we made. We were fairly successful. We hovered around the break-even point. You were a little bit above. I was a little bit below. Last week, I was a little bit above. You were a little bit below. So we're essentially even through the playoffs.
And again, our picks came down to a single field goal separating.
Single field goal. Speaking of a single field goal, let's talk about that. One of the games that was not a close game, but it was in some ways decided by that narrowest of margins. That was the Baltimore Ravens against the Houston Texans. CJ Stroud, the Texans, their kind of Cinderella story, came to a crashing halt in Baltimore. They kind of kept it together through the first half, but then they did nothing in the second half and lost 34-10. Did you learn anything from the game? Do you think Baltimore are they a juggernaut, or were the Texans simply kind of happy to be there and maybe outmanned?
Yeah, I think Houston was definitely playing with house money. Anything they did was a success at that point. So, they didn't need to do anything to prove that they had a good season. If they come a long ways from drafting number 1 just earlier this year, or earlier in that fiscal year, I suppose, for the season. So Yeah, I mean, it didn't seem like either team really had much offense. Like in the first half, it was what a 10-10 score at the half.
10-10 at
Uh,
halftime, yeah.
and then, a few plays basically turned the game in the second half, and Baltimore ended up opening up a bigger lead. So, I mean, from what we can tell, it seems like Baltimore is I mean, they probably earned their number one seed and played like a number one seed, beating the weakest team that was left in the AFC. So that's what they're supposed to do.
It was
But I
also
don't know
cold.
if that makes them a juggernaut, though.
Yeah, it was also cold weather in Baltimore.
Yeah.
They're playing a team that is a dome team from a warm climate, not with a rookie quarterback that's probably not used to playing in the cold. I guess CJ Stroud played at Ohio State, but most of the even the Big Ten season, it's over by the 1st of December. They don't play in the Big Ten when it gets really really cold up there. They if they play in December or January, it's down in the Orange Bowl or someplace like that, or Pasadena. So he hadn't. So I don't think Stroud had experienced the real cold before, and it had been, and compared for Baltimore, it was a fairly cold. There was snow on the ground. It was not like Kansas City was 2 weeks ago, but it was still pretty below freezing there. So that I think the weather had something to do with it. I don't think Stroud probably threw the ball very well. When the Chiefs come next week, the weather will actually be a little bit warmer, and the Chiefs certainly are no stranger to cold weather games. So I don't think that'll be an advantage for the Ravens. But yeah, I thought the most maddening thing, we kind of hinted at it, was that the over under of that game was 43 and a half. The score was 34-10. So this total was 44. So it just tipped the over. And how it tipped was on a meaningless field goal with like 2 or 3 minutes left in the game that Baltimore decided to kick. They were up 31-10. And instead of just running the ball or trying to run the clock down, they decided to kick the field goal to go up 24 instead of 21 with about 3 minutes remaining. And
Inside the 2 minute warning.
was it inside the 2 minute warning?
Yeah, right. The 2 minute warning happened, and then they kicked the field goal.
I was thinking it was 3 minutes. Oh, it was inside the two. I forgot.
So
So
it's even worse, is what you're saying.
even worse. And like, no Andy Reid coach team would have done such an ungentlemanly act. They would have run the ball and let the clock run out. So
Or turn it over on downs, I guess.
turn it over on downs.
Yeah.
Yeah, they would just run it and turn it over on downs,
Yeah.
and then kneel when they could after that last first down and try to get as few points as possible, keep it under. But John Harbaugh decided to take the points, and which sealed your victory, and because you picked the over in that game, and it just barely skipped over. I picked the under. We both picked Baltimore to win. We actually picked Houston, I think, both to keep it close. That didn't happen. So,
Which, I mean, it was for most of the game. It's just the fourth quarter with the 17-point outburst by Baltimore. Then
yeah. So you
really put it across there.
you got that over under right. You got picking the over. I got that wrong. We did both pick Baltimore on the money line. We actually got all four money line bets correct, since we agreed with each other, and we were each right. We were right on all four of the games. So, but the spread favored Baltimore. They won by 24, so they were 15 points about 14 and a half points above where they needed to be. But that over, that 1/2 point, that's what will end up separating us on the weekend. Anything else you remember from the Baltimore game? The numbers that the Ravens put up weren't particularly impressive. Lamar Jackson had 150-ish yards passing. He was at 100 yards on the ground, but not that many total yards for the Ravens. It was a methodical kind of win where they ground out some big chunk plays in the second half, but it was, I don't know. I guess it seems like the Texans were outclassed.
But yeah, time of possession, number of plays and time of possession were like strongly in Baltimore's favor. 37 and a half minutes, 22 and a half minutes for time of possession. So that's, I mean, that's a big, if you can carry the ball, hold on to the ball 15 more minutes of the game, you're probably going to win.
Yeah, well, usually we'll talk about the other AFC game. The Chiefs and the Bills, where it was
almost identical time of possession in this game.
yeah, and the Chiefs won that game. So, like, if you're very efficient at scoring, you don't need to have the ball uh as long. But yeah, it was almost the same, 37-23. But we'll talk about the Chiefs a little bit. But
No.
yeah. So if you're good, if you have Patrick Mahomes on the team, you don't need the ball as much to score. And this is kind of what the Chiefs used to do, is where they would score so quickly, the other team would try to keep them off the field. But
yeah,
things have changed a little bit. But this in some ways was like an older version of the Chiefs, where the offense was actually clicking and things like that. Should we move on from Baltimore to maybe the most surprising game, do you think, in terms of how close it turned out to be? Green Bay at San Francisco. This was a game where Green Bay almost won. You could argue maybe they actually should have won that game. They probably, do you think they outplay the 49ers in your opinion, or was it
it was awfully close. I mean, and they had the lead late and took San Francisco had to score the final 10 points of the game to end up winning. So,
and there was this field goal that kept them from being farther ahead. By Carlson. We had two important missed field goals late in the games this past weekend. But yeah, Carlson was,
yes,
he missed a 41 or 42-yard field goal at the end that would have put them up 7, I think, instead of only up 4, which they were. So it would have been a tie game probably. But it was, I think, maybe the biggest thing that came out of this game was Deebo Samuel's injury, and that, really once Deebo went down, it seems like the 49ers look pretty pedestrian on offense. Do you think that's going to impact the NFC Championship game next week? That injury?
It seemed to affect them a lot in the regular season when he was out. It sounds like it may be like a broken bone in his collarbone, apparently. So
I think they said he didn't have a broken bone just recently. They just had an MRI done, or a X-ray that so Deebo, they say, is 50-50 to play.
Okay. Well, that's a huge sigh of relief then for San Francisco fans everywhere, I'm sure.
Yes. Yeah, so, well, he's probably, if he's 50-50 for next week, he's probably, if the 49ers win, he's probably ready for the Super Bowl if the 49ers beat Detroit. But yeah, but Green Bay really
fracture in his left shoulder. That is correct. Yeah.
Green Bay really surprised some people, and they really rolled Dallas, and they almost beat San Francisco. You think this is something that they're going to build on next year?
I have no idea at all what to think of them at all. It's been really maddening to try to like predict what they're going to do, because they whenever you think that they seem like they had it figured out, and they didn't play well, and then when you were surely betting against them, thinking they were going to play terrible, they'd somehow have a great game, and it just really doesn't. They don't make a lot of sense, I think, most of the time.
Yeah, they were really inconsistent. They had a great start to the season, and then they were terrible, and then they had a great finish. And Love played amazingly well for a while. It seems like but he also might be a flash in the pan. It's hard to say. It's only 1 year. You have to, repeat that success. It's harder to do. And I think both of us are still skeptical of the quality of coaching that Matt LaFleur provides, and the offensive outlook that he has. But it seems like they've drafted well and have a lot of good young receivers and things like that in Green Bay. But
is your comment on drafting well, including the Jordan Love selection?
So that was we didn't think that was a good pick, but maybe it turned out to be one. I don't know. We'll have to see what happens with Love next year. He's played pretty well this year. He had pretty good stats, similar to what Mahomes had this year. This is Mahomes' worst year, but it was statistically, but he was still solid as a quarterback,
Mhm.
yeah, so was Love. So I don't know. He was I think in some ways we thought Jordan Love was going to be a bust, and he should not have been picked, but turns out he might be okay. But you could say, well, at what cost was he drafted over somebody else? And maybe they could have gotten somebody a year or two down the road,
Yeah.
uh, and maybe helped Rodgers a little bit more to help him get over the hump and get to a Super Bowl rather than preparing for 3, 4, 5 years down the road
Yeah.
uh, with Jordan Love. But
I can't
uh,
imagine that the love that selecting Jordan Love was worth the stress that it caused with all of the media attention over the next several years.
yeah, in
Just
some
if
ways.
you knew that was what the case was going to be, just don't do that just to avoid that scenario.
Yeah, well, I think a lot of people we thought, well, in some ways we thought Jordan Love was going to be like Trey Lance, the 49ers quarterback who, they drafted Lance thinking he was going to be their, the person that was going to, push them over the hump. But they didn't really need to draft Lance because they had a decent quarterback in Garoppolo, I think, that led them to the Super Bowl. And they probably could have, if he had, unfortunately, every quarterback in San Francisco seems to get hurt all the time.
True.
But it turns out they could have just drafted the person at the very end of the draft, like they did with Brock Purdy, and had a serviceable quarterback as well. So, this is the 49ers are one of those offenses that seems like where it doesn't really matter maybe as much who the quarterback is, but you need those great playmakers on the outside. You have Kittle, you have Ayuk, and you have Deebo Samuel, and solid, up the middle offensive line, solid fullback and use check, and those guys. You need like everybody else to be really, really good, and then it doesn't really matter who your quarterback is.
You just need a
Um,
serviceable quarterback,
mhm.
right? Yeah.
And Purdy is somebody who can run the offense and be serviceable, maybe above serviceable. It's hard to say,
Yeah.
but
But he only has to be serviceable. If he's better than that, fantastic. If he's not,
yeah,
as long as he's serviceable.
yeah.
Yeah.
There's a reason probably he was picked in the 7th round. It wasn't thinking of conventional wisdom, or scouting, things like that. Nobody, I think, thought of him as that highly. Even you can say that even the 49ers didn't think of him that highly. If they had actually thought he was going to be good, they would not have picked him as Mr. Irrelevant in the 7th round. They would have picked him higher, like just like
Yeah.
the Patriots. If they had thought that Tom Brady was actually going to be good, well, they wouldn't have waited to the 6th round to get him. They would have gotten him quite a bit earlier and not run the risk that somebody else saw this diamond in the rough.
Anyone else could have thought that, right? So
Yeah,
yeah.
yeah. Or the Albert Pujols in the 13th round of the baseball draft. It's not because the Cardinals were so great at seeing talent. They were, slightly better than everybody else, maybe, but if they had really thought he was going to be good, they would have picked him number, as high as they could possibly have. So
Yeah.
it's, you want, if you think he's going to be a Hall of Famer, you're not going to say, well, I think we can get him in the 6th round, even though I know he's a surefire, or I think we can get him in the 13th round because I know he's a surefire Hall of Famer, but I'm pretty confident nobody else sees what I see in him. And you can even say, well, maybe the Chiefs were a little bit, they traded up to number 10 to get Patrick Mahomes, but even they probably, had they known what Mahomes would have been, they probably would have tried to trade up even higher in the draft to get Mahomes. Would you say so?
But then so would every other team would have done the
But
same thing
but but,
too.
but the
Yeah.
Chiefs. But you would think though, well, if
Yeah.
the Chiefs know, like we know this guy's a surefire Hall of Fame quarterback. We know he's the best person. We would trade up to. I guess you could say, well, we know that Cleveland's going to take Myles Garrett. We know that maybe there's a little bit of gamesmanship there, but
Yeah.
you would probably trade it up to number 2, maybe, or number 3 to make sure you got the first quarterback off the
Right.
board. Because, like we said, the Bears said they were going to pick Mahomes, and they ended up picking Trubisky, whether there was some possibility that Mahomes was going to be off the board. They should have traded up to get to at least number 2, if they really thought that was going to be he was going to be the the next great quarterback.
I think we're just really lucky that we ended up.
Yeah.
Now looking back at it, no.
And the pick, of course, was traded from the Buffalo Bills to the Kansas City Chiefs. So the Bills gave up Mahomes, possibly. Instead, decided to go another year with Tyrod Taylor as quarterback, and then the next year drafted Josh Allen. So still picked a pretty good quarterback, but maybe not a Mahomesian quality quarterback. But anyway, we'll get to that Mahomes-Allen matchup in a second. But any other parts of Green Bay, San Francisco? Talk about our bets a little bit on that game.
Yep.
Green Bay was
9.5-point favorite.
9.5-point underdogs, just
like San Francisco. Yeah.
San Francisco was 9.5-point favorites, just like Baltimore was over Houston. But I ended up getting that one correct. I thought that Green Bay would keep it close. You thought San Francisco would kind of walk over Green Bay. So I ended up winning that one. That was the only spread, I got 2 spreads correct. So that was one of the 2 spreads that I got correct. And then I got the money line. We both picked San Francisco to win, and we also both picked the under in that game, and we each got that. So I had a clean sweep in San Francisco and Green Bay. That was the only game I swept.
There were 2 missed field goals, so it could have hit the over.
It could have been 51.
If both teams were perfect for the field goals, the score spread would have been the same, but the point total would have been 6 points higher, which would have hit the over, I think.
Would have been just half point high.
Would have been a half point over, yeah.
That would have been the most frustrating Saturday then if both games had gone half point over and I'd picked under in both games. At least you would have gotten one of those 2 right. I would have missed both of those.
Yes, right.
Fortunately, we got that one right. But you want to move on to Sunday's games?
Let's do it.
Talk about what I think is probably the least attractive matchup was the Tampa Bay Detroit game, probably because I think those 2 teams are 2 of the bottom 3 or 4 teams playing that weekend. I think that was the least attractive matchup, because I think Detroit is a good team, but they're not they're not in the class of, I don't think, Kansas City, Buffalo, or the Ravens, or the 49ers. I think they're at best probably the 5th best team that was playing on that weekend. And you could make an argument that Tampa Bay was probably the worst team in the wild that advanced out of the wild card round. So it was like maybe a number 5 versus number 8 type matchup.
Well, Detroit had kind of like slid towards the end of the season. They had like a good start to the year, and they were kind of looking iffy as the season went on, but they still held on to their spot. And
you think maybe Green Bay even maybe had passed them as a playoff team, maybe Houston even. But yeah, this was a team that, fortunately they're playing the Baker Mayfield led Tampa Bay Buccaneers, who Mayfield had a good game. Maybe he cemented himself as at least the medium term, if not long term, starter in Tampa Bay. But
349 yards passing in the game for Baker.
Yeah, and 2 interceptions. One of them was not really his fault, but then the last one at the end of the game was what sealed the fate. Oh, I had a question for you. Do you think it was why? So this game was ended up 31-23, so it went over the point total. It scored 54. The point total was 50.5. Both of us
48.5 is what we closed at.
48.5, excuse me. I was the other one. So it went over, so comfortably over. I picked the under, you picked the over in that one, so you got the points there. Do you think, though, that so it was 31-17 at one point, and Tampa Bay, when they scored their touchdown in the 4th quarter, they decided to go for 2 when it was 31-23 to try to get it to be 31-25 instead of taking the extra point to make it 31-24. Do you think that was the smart move to make, why go for two then when you don't have to? Because then it forces you into going for two later. If you
If you don't get it, I guess, right? Yeah. So how much time was left in the game when they did that?
there were
Well, it's only,
several minutes,
there's only four
five,
and a half minutes left. So
5 minutes,
so
4.5 minutes.
it's almost like they're playing at if they get the 2 point conversion, that they still have two possessions left, where they only have to get field goals on both of them if they're unable to get the touchdown.
I
Uh,
think it seems like they were going for the win. I think thinking that we
yeah,
get the point conversion, um,
they
and then we
still
get
can
a
get another
touchdown.
touchdown.
We just
So
yeah, they still need. I don't know. I didn't like that decision.
it seems silly to do it early because then it binds you into a more difficult route later. So I think if you tie the game with nothing left, or you get it within one with no time left, and then it's the difference between kicking an extra point or going for two in the win right now. It's still dumb because you should just tie the game and go to
Yeah,
overtime and take your
I
chances
guess
there.
yeah, I think if you go for two there, you should never kick an extra point. You should always go for two, which technically maybe is the best route to take because you're
Um,
probably about, I think you're going for 2% from the 2 yard line is about 50-50, and you're kicking it extra point is not perfectly 100%. It's probably more like 98%.
well,
So maybe you have a slight advantage if you go for two every time, but you lose those points. But you also lose momentum when you don't make it when you go for two, and you give the other team some momentum, saying, "Hey, we got that defensive stop. They only got 6. They didn't get 7."
yeah,
Uh, so I don't. I think unless you're like completely all in on the,
on the two-point
sabermetric
conversion.
analysis
Yeah,
of football, and like, you're never gonna punt, and you're never gonna kick an extra point. You're always gonna go for two. If you don't dive in all the way, I think you should be more selective, and I think they should have. I think they should have kicked the extra point there too. Um, because I think the benefit of getting it versus, because you still need another touchdown. And depending on how things are going, you could also say, well, we might just want to go for the tie rather than go for the win because we have momentum. And the overtime in the playoffs is different from overtime in the regular season, because even if the other team scores a touchdown on the first possession, if we score a touchdown on our first possession, we get another possession, we can score a touchdown. We don't have to rely on our defense. So I think yeah, I think it was the wrong decision. I also thought that was the wrong decision for Dan Campbell to keep going for two, even after the first time against Dallas, where his team lost the game because
yeah.
for two when they didn't have to. But I go for the tie, and then go for over. If you think your team is the better team, you think they can probably win in overtime. So I don't know, but that was the question that I had about that game. It ended up being 31-23 Detroit. Jared Goff back in the NFC Championship game. I believe he is one of only maybe 2 or 3 quarterbacks to lead 2 teams to different championship to the conference championship games.
Is that right?
I'm not sure. I think it's a very um
Joe Montana.
Joe Montana. We have Joe Montana, Tom Brady,
Yeah.
and I'm not sure if anybody else did that or not. But it seems like it seems a pretty rarefied error. I think that Goff
Yeah.
has gotten to. I'm trying to think if anybody else off the top of my head. I can't think of somebody off the top of my head that has done that. We're probably idiots in missing somebody obvious, but
Yeah.
um,
Hmm.
I don't know. Well,
I'll
maybe
try
we'll
to
think.
do a quick search here and see
Okay.
what the answer is.
I'm trying to think of maybe
Oh, well,
like
we know Peyton Manning.
Peyton Manning did that. Okay, so he's also in, like, well, look at the
Two
people. So it's
more.
2 more. So it's Montana, Peyton Manning, and Tom Brady. So those are like 3 of the best quarterbacks of all time, and Jared
Yeah.
Goff. Um, was like Earl Morrall or somebody? Was he? He was.
This isn't even this one doesn't even say Montana. But he did though, right? I mean the Chiefs went to
Chiefs
the
were in the
conference,
NFC Championship.
right?
Yeah. Super Bowl. Yeah, it's the Super Bowl. Is that two quarterbacks in quarterback two teams in the Super Bowl maybe is
I don't know. Anyway, but it has to be. Yeah, but there's two more though. And you're aware of them both for sure, 100%.
Any hints?
Um, we've
Was Doug Williams one of them?
no more contemporary. Uh,
Not
let's
Drew
see.
Brees.
Without giving away entirely.
Randall Cunningham?
One was whose NFL career began somewhat surprisingly, as he was signed, I believe, out of a grocery store
Oh,
job.
Kurt Warner, duh. Kurt Warner, yeah. Okay.
Another has been involved very negatively in some local politics in the South.
Oh, Brett Favre. So they're all Hall of Famers then, except for Jared Goff. It's Jared Goff and like four of the great quarterbacks that have played the game. Okay. So Favre did it with, I forgot he did it with Minnesota that one year.
Yeah.
Yeah. I don't think it was the Jets. I think it was with Minnesota, wasn't it? Yeah.
I think Minnesota, yeah.
And yeah, so all of those quarterbacks have won Super Bowls, though. Jared Goff has not, but still, those five are all
they're all those careers are done. Goff's is still going though, so
yeah. So Goff could win a Super Bowl. Yeah. So if Goff wins a Super Bowl, does he become a Hall of Fame quarterback since he is the quarterback of two teams that advanced to the Super Bowl?
There is a set of quarterbacks with those things in them, and they're all Hall of Famers. So
even Joe Montana couldn't take two teams to the Super Bowl. He only took them to the championship game. Chiefs. Yeah, that's hilarious. I think that the Goff, but it seems like a weaker set of teams to beat though. You
can only play the team that's.
Well, I guess they beat the Rams. I thought the Rams were the Rams are a better team than the Buccaneers are. I think the Rams are a better team also than the Lions are at this point. And you think, oh, the Rams were that close to going maybe to the NFC Championship game and maybe could have given the 49ers a run for their money. Who knows? But yeah, so congratulations to the Lions. But I think it seems like the 49ers are the clear favorites in that game, at least if Debo can sort of play, or if the 49ers can at least resemble the team that they were for most of the regular season.
Oh, I didn't even notice this though, but maybe the reason they went for two, Mike, what would have been to cover the spread. Because they lost by 8, and it was a 6.5 point spread.
6.5 point spread. Yeah, the gambling community says cover the spread. Take it to 6.
Go for 2.
7 won't do it.
I mean, we would have appreciated that because we both took Tampa to keep it close.
We did.
But both had Detroit winning. So the 2-point conversion cost us both bets.
Getting the 2-point conversion cost us. So we were only a half point off. We were 1.5 points off. You were correct that it hit the over. It was 50. It was 54 total points. I thought it was going to be the under 48.5. So yeah, you won that game, Dr. Scaff. Should we move on to the Chiefs and their victory over the Buffalo Bills?
Let's do it.
In Orchard Park, New York. Were you surprised? We both picked the Chiefs to win, but did you pick the Chiefs to win because you thought they would win, or simply because you wanted them to win?
I was surprisingly more confident about the game than I have been most of the season, I think. So I thought that they would win, but you don't know. I don't think I was hedging my bet on this one anyway. So I mean,
I think mine
took them on the money line, and not just to cover the spread, but to win. How about you? Did you
I
think?
think mine was where I wanted them to win. I think
Yeah.
I thought they could win. I didn't really know who was going to win, but I didn't want to bet against them, so I went with them. That's maybe going to be what's going to happen this coming week when we talk about the Baltimore Kansas City matchup. Is I want the Chiefs to win. I think they can win, and I
Hmm.
certainly want to bet against them. So I'm going to pick them on the money line, and then
Right.
therefore on the spread as well.
The offense seems to be coming to life at the right time. They were able to
Yeah,
move the ball a lot better. They could score some touchdowns this time.
we have a new star fan among the audience, and that is
Yeah.
so maybe even overshadowing Taylor Swift in the crowd. That was Jason Kelsey, shirtless during much of the game,
Right.
drinking, cheering. Were you surprised how enthusiastic Jason was cheering
Yeah.
on the Chiefs?
And wearing a Chiefs beanie too. So that was
Yes,
maybe a little surprising, at least anyway. But yes, jumping out of the box into the crowd, man of the people.
he was a man of the people.
Absolutely.
Supposedly, his wife Kylie had Patrick Mahomes' dad yell at him to get back in the suite at one point, uh, and
That's
that's what
good.
happened. Yeah,
That's
so
fantastic. I hadn't heard that story. That's funny.
yeah, there's a picture of Patrick Mahomes' dad leaning out of the suite at him, but I think he says your wife wants you to get your ass back in here or something like that is what he supposedly said. But I
That's
think
pretty cool.
also supposedly that was the first time that he had met Taylor Swift in person.
I did see that, but I did not see the
So the shirtless drunk brother-in-law, potential brother-in-law, uh, you know. So but he became the star of I think of the crowd, even though we had famous Taylor Swift in the crowd and Brittany Mahomes. I don't know if do you think is Taylor Swift, is she going to be at the game in Baltimore?
I haven't heard anything yet, but I mean, it seems like
Her
she
tour,
would
I
be.
believe, is going to be started by the time the Super Bowl starts. I think she's going to be in Tokyo as during the Super Bowl. So if the Chiefs make the Super Bowl, I don't think she will be
Ah,
the audience. But I guess that could change. But I don't see her moving her tour date
probably
over.
not. Yeah,
Yeah,
and that'd be a lot of flying if there's enough time to physically fly back and back again.
yeah,
That would be a lot.
yeah. I don't think it's going to happen. But we did have. I guess we did see that Kelsey did go to Brazil during the bye week to see Taylor there, but that was during the bye week, so we're not, I don't think either of them are missing performances games
Right.
at this point. But yeah, I what was so back to the actual game on the field. What was the most impressive thing about the Chiefs' victory over the Bills?
I think it was probably like yeah, the offensive efficiency. Really, it's they were getting big chunks of yards, which they haven't really done that much recently. They like pretty most I mean most of the players were contributing a lot, really. Like Rice had some nice catches, moved the ball downfield a lot, and
MVS had a
Pacheco.
couple of good catches.
MVS had like two great catches that were, really challenged, and he, held on to them, and that was fantastic.
This was the Marcus Valdez-Scantling that maybe showed up as well last year in the AFC Championship game win. So maybe he's more of a playoff wide receiver than a regular season wide receiver. A little bit like Sammy Watkins was a playoff guy rather than a regular season guy for the
Could
Chiefs.
be.
So yeah, I was impressed by the offense. They were averaging, I believe, 9.9 yards a play for much of the game.
Yeah.
Fourth brought it down a little bit. Also, they had 4 kneel downs. I think they ended up with average of 7.7 yards per play. But if you take away those kneel downs, it was like 8.5 yards per play.
Yeah.
So, and it
And,
wasn't
and
like
I
they had like 299-yard plays either. It was that they
right.
had big plays just about every time they wanted to.
When I think after their like 30th play, they had like 15 first downs, which is that's pretty crazy
They
to
only had, I think, 5
all
third
that much.
downs the entire
Yeah.
game. So they were converting everything on first and second down. Like most in those third downs, I think 2 of them were what led to field goals. They didn't have a third down, and they couldn't convert the early third downs, and then later they could convert most of those third downs they got um, into first downs. But yeah, I thought Mahomes played really, really well. He ran when he had to. I thought Pacheco had a really good game. The receivers, for the most part, didn't drop anything. Um, Watson had a drop in the first quarter that ended a drive. That was maybe one of the third downs that led to a field goal. But
Mhm.
Butker, he kicked the ball really well in those bad conditions. It was and then the defense, I thought, really in the second half at least, really turned it on and was able to stop um, uh, Allen when they needed to, force that field goal at the end that was missed by Bass. Maybe the only person that had a bad game was Nicole Hardman
Oh
with
yeah, with the multiple fumbles,
2
right?
fumbles. One was recovered by the Chiefs and one wasn't. But I think the Bills were also fortunate. They had a couple of fumbles. Both of them were recovered by the Bills, even though each one I think the Chiefs had a really good shot at getting. So
That
uh,
one late was especially close, and
yeah.
oh, oh,
I think Shamari Connor wanted to take it in as a scoop and score, but if he had just fallen on it, he probably would have gotten it.
yeah.
Uh, that was a tough one. But the Chiefs they had that fake punt that the Chiefs prevented. I think there were only 10 men on the field during that fake punt. That's why
Is that right?
I think that's why the Bills went with the fake punt, was that there were only 10 guys on the field. The
I know they,
Chiefs
they
had,
the announcers made a comment that they only had like a maybe one fewer guy in the box than normal,
yeah,
and that's why maybe they thought
yeah. I think maybe
they
I think
a guy short.
that was the
Yeah.
reason. That was the reason they had one fewer guy in the box league, because they only had 10 on the field. Uh,
They wanted a full complement.
Um, but
Crazy.
then the Chiefs had Hardman not fumbled the ball at the goal line, which I think was still a very iffy call. I'm surprised it got overturned. It looked like it was very close to me that he could have been down. You didn't see like the squish of his body, which I guess is what they were counting when he went down. Like you saw the squish kind of the body like hitting the turf after the ball was moving, but I thought he might be down even before the ball was moving. It was really close to me.
But
I'm
that's one of
surprised.
those things where the officials are supposed to go off of clear and convincing evidence. So like they have to have proof because it was called the opposite way on the field.
Yeah,
And I don't know that there was an angle that you could definitively say that he did not have the ball before he hit the ground. So that's what there were a lot of really questionable calls in the game, especially in the first drive of the game. I don't know if you noticed that there was a pass that was the lateral that was thrown that was
yeah.
went forward by a full yard that the refs didn't catch and the Chiefs didn't
They
challenge.
They should have challenged that one. That led to 7 points, I think. So
And then I think 2 plays later there was a catch that the receiver landed on his back out of bounds, but never had any feet down at all. So that was there were a couple of like really crazy plays that Buffalo rushed up to the line like they should have because they would have got calls overturned. But I don't know. I mean, these are like things that should have been noticed on the field and didn't need to be challenged because they were somewhat obvious live, but it would have been nice if the Chiefs got that because I think that they got behind early, and it was partly because the officials are bad at making calls.
well, those are close. It's hard to see. Then you think, well, that's why we have the review process, because we can see that there are calls that are incorrect. But if the Chiefs don't take advantage of that, that's
And
sort
you
of on the
shouldn't really need to challenge things like the onus should be on the correct call. It shouldn't matter who
ideally, yeah,
initiates the challenge of what the call on the field was. Just
yeah.
get it right every time. Why is that so much to ask, Mike?
Well, they're humans and they're going to get it right every time. But you think they can do a little better maybe than they do, or that there are people that are watching it that could correct it if they see it more easily than they would, rather than having to force the teams to wait on like replays provided by CBS or whatever to overturn them. But
Yeah.
unfortunately, those there weren't a lot. I thought what was good was there weren't a ton of penalties called
That's
um,
true.
on either team, which I'd rather have than a bunch of penalties called, even if so. So I think that they kind of let them play. I didn't think it seemed like it was a particularly, I don't know. I didn't see a lot of holding necessarily that seemed egregious.
Hmm.
I didn't see a lot of things that were let go, but I thought it was so I thought it was a well officiated game in that sense.
There
Um,
were only 7 total penalties in the game, only 43 yards, awarded between the two teams. So the
yeah,
officials weren't overly involved, but
yeah.
they also didn't make the correct call sometimes though.
There
So
was one questionable pass interference penalty, I think, that the Chiefs got. Actually, it was to the Chiefs' advantage. I think the ball might not have been in the air when he was
mhm.
bumped, but maybe the ball was in the air by the time the contact was over. That was a,
Yeah.
but it was. So I thought, yeah, there weren't a whole lot of penalties. So I thought it was a pretty well called game. I thought the Chiefs, um, yeah, their offense played as well as that it has this year almost. They just didn't have the ball very much. We talk about time of
Yeah.
possession. Usually, teams that are dominated in the time of possession don't win, like the Houston Texans. But the Chiefs here, were just able to move the ball at will, at least during the middle part of the game. Um, the fourth quarter kind of things got shut down, but I think the Chiefs could have
Oh,
really broken it
yeah.
open had Hardman not fumbled it. That would have basically ended the game. I think they would have been up 10 with you know 10 minutes to play or something like that, and I think they would have forced Buffalo into desperation mode, and I think the Chiefs um, would have capitalized there. But
Mhm.
Chiefs won, and now they're going to Baltimore. So what we're talking about our bets again. We each picked the Chiefs on the spread. They were 2.5 point underdogs, and they won outright. So we got that right. We each picked them to win the game on the money line, and we got that right.
Which
We
was
also
our biggest payoff too, because the Chiefs were the underdogs and
underdogs. Yeah, we won
yeah.
$224 on that one.
Yeah.
And we also we each picked the under in that game, and it turned out to be over 51 points over the 45 and a half that it was. So I believe you were waffling. You usually pick the overs on those Chiefs games, and you ended up picking the under this time. Um, any regrets?
I would have been perfect on over unders had I gone with my gut instead of listened to my brain. Stupid brain. Should have just gone with the gut.
No, the gut. Great shooter.
It was
Yeah.
one of my few misses on the week actually. So I was ended up 9 of 12 on picks, or 7 of 12 this week.
Mhm.
I ended up $171, which is about 14% gain for the week. You were down just $12, minus 1%.
Yeah.
But you were up similarly last week to what, flip of this week. So our playoff total, Mike, now has us with you in the lead up $22.10.
Yes.
My $19.18. So less than $3 separates our winnings for this playoff season so far.
Well, this is what we clearly should be doing is making playoff wagers since we're both making money.
Yes.
We'll see if we can continue this when it comes to the championship games. But so the AFC Championship is set. Chiefs at the Ravens. NFC Championship is set. Lions at 49ers. We'll talk about them in a second. But do you want to take a brief baseball interlude?
Let's do it. Talk about the Hall of Fame.
Yes. We had three players elected to the Baseball Hall of Fame that eclipsed the 75% threshold required by the Baseball Writers Association. And those three players were Adrian Beltre, Todd Helton, and Joe Mauer each made it. I believe Beltre and Mauer were each in their first year
That's right.
of
Helton's in
eligibility.
sixth, I think.
Helton was in his sixth. Do you agree with those? choices? Are those Hall of Fame players in your mind?
I'm probably a little surprised actually at all three to some extent. Like I think Beltray, I didn't realize how strong his numbers were actually. I think it's really what it was. I remember him being around for a long time and late in his career he was, had some kind of like goofy interactions with Elvis Andrews that I always thought were entertaining. But I don't know that I realized like how great his numbers were until I looked them up after seeing that.
He was well over
Even before
3,000
that.
hits.
Yeah, I
I
didn't
think
remember that he was that high, hit totals. Yeah.
he had 12 more hits than like George Brett had in his career. So
Yeah.
I don't think he would ever reach the heights that he was third baseman usually. Some shortstop. I don't think he ever reached quite the heights of Brett or some of the other great third basemen. But he was a very good player. I think he was better maybe than Scott Rowland was, who got in uh,
Hmm.
last year, 2 years ago, something like that. Um, but I was a little surprised. I would say I wasn't surprised about simply just because I knew Belcher had over 3,000 hits, and it's automatic. I was a little
Yeah.
surprised about both Helton and Mauer um, getting in. Billy Wagner was fourth. He had 73.8% of the vote. Gary Sheffield, 63.9%. Andrew Jones, 61.6%. And then Carlos Beltran is 57.1%. Those are the only ones above 50%.
And I think that was Sheffield's 10th attempt. So I think that
Yeah.
will be his last attempt.
Yes,
I
Sheffield
think
has that steroid
Jones. Mhm.
tinge to him, which is the reason he didn't make it. Otherwise, I think he was Alex Rodriguez was below Beltran. Uh, and so, he's by the numbers, Rodriguez is one of the great players ever in baseball, and he's not probably going to make the Hall of Fame, at
Mhm.
least not conventionally. He's only in his third year though, so maybe he'll move up. Manny Ramirez also, seems like a Hall of Fame player, but he also had steroid allegations and suspensions. Um, he's in his eighth year, 32.5%. So those guys are probably not going to make it. But
I think Beltran is probably unlikely to make it too, though, because of participating in the Astros cheating scandal from a few years ago, also because that
yeah,
that cost him a managerial job, also. So
yeah,
essentially, the only person punished from the
yeah.
Astros scandal.
But yeah, Beltran might would he be a Royal? Do you think in the Hall of
Mm.
Fame?
Well, you'd think he would not go in as an Astro because of that.
Mhm.
So possibly that's where he started. That would make sense, but you don't know. Sometimes those guys like when they leave, they don't want to look back at their earliest years, at least anyway. So
Yeah.
you never know.
I think the
Or
person
they
I
could be
think he should be in the
peaks.
Hall of Fame of the people who didn't make it is Andrew Jones, because he's simply a really great defensive center fielder that is probably the defense is being undervalued. He didn't have a great batting average. He hit a lot of home runs, and he also kind of fell off a cliff once he got to about age 30, which I think shows that he probably was not a steroid user, and that his decline happened early in his career. Usually the steroid guys, they hang on for a while and they have great seasons in their age 35, 36, 38, 41 year. It's
Yeah.
not like it's Ichiro or even like Ichiro, who's we're talking about maybe next year. He is the surefire candidate for next year, um, who had over 3,000 hits in the majors. That was after having a fairly lengthy career in Japan.
Over a
um,
thousand hits there.
yeah, he had more hits total than Pete Rose had overall, and I think yeah. So, but so Ichiro, I would vote. He stays surefire Hall of Fame player. I don't know if I'd vote for
Think you'll
anybody else.
we're getting 100% of the vote?
Has anybody gotten 100% of the vote?
I don't know.
Mariano Rivera was pretty close, I think,
I think
right?
he was close, yeah. Yeah. I don't know.
Mariano Rivera was 100%.
Okay. Is he
So
the
he's
only one to do that then?
number one, 100%. Which actually is a little surprising. Derek Jeter he was 99.7%.
I wouldn't have voted for him.
Griffey 99.3.
Would have voted for him.
Tom Seaver 98.8, Nolan Ryan 98.8, George Brett's got to be up there. He was 98.2%. So yeah, there's a few. Hank Aaron's only 97.8. This is first ballot though, so
Yeah.
so some people didn't vote. Adrian Beltre 95.1 is one of the highest, one of the top 20.
Wow.
So he actually is tied with Babe Ruth 95.1. So there are people that didn't vote for Babe Ruth in the Hall of Fame
Yeah.
on his first ballot, which
There probably
seems.
are just some people that just say they won't vote for anybody in their first ballot.
And then I guess they took that off for Rivera though.
Yeah. Well, maybe those guys have all retired by now. Those sports writers.
But then there was still one that didn't pick Jeter. Like
If I had a vote, I wouldn't have voted for him.
no,
No.
stick it to him.
His two biggest plays would have been overturned by replay. So like
But yeah, but he has like the numbers though. He had I see 3,465 hits. So, like he's
eh,
well over 3,000. I know you don't like Jeter, but I would have voted. You would have probably. I think if push came to shove, I think you would have voted for him as a Hall. He might not be an all-time great, but I think he's a Hall of Fame player for sure. Um, it's a little surprising, but yeah, there are only. Yeah, George Brett is one of 8 people with over 98% of the vote. So, but anyway, Helton. As I mentioned, I think Andrew Jones is probably the person who got snubbed the most.
hmm.
I would have picked him over Maurer probably, because I think he had a better defense. He was better on defense than Maurer was. Maurer had a great few years, but I don't know. I guess maybe I'm just not as impressed. Maybe just because he was in Minnesota, I didn't like him. I don't know, but he was a good player. But I'm surprised he got in first ballot, at
Yeah.
least. And it's been
I think he
Andrew
had one of
Jones.
the lower Hall of Fame expected scores,
Yeah,
which is a little surprising, I guess, but not really. And Helton had the Coors Field effect. I
yeah.
think I think it's part of why it took him so long to get in, but his numbers are
Would you?
pretty good. But
Larry Walker got in before Helton. Would you have put Walker above Helton? Do you think Walker was a better player?
well, he had some years outside of
He played Montreal.
Baltimore too.
I think he played for the Mets for a little while.
Yeah. Yeah, it's tough with the only playing in one team. Then there are also those people that would say that, oh well, he didn't win a World Series and because Colorado never won. So some of those sports writers don't want you know those guys in there.
So Walker played for the Cardinals and the Expos. Those are the two. He didn't play for. He didn't play. I was thinking he played for the Mets for some reason, but he never played for
Hmm.
them. Walker got
Cardinals,
in.
yeah, they're basically the same.
Walker got in on the 10th ballot, on the very last ballot in 2020.
Yeah. So Walker's four ballots worse, I guess, than Helton. Is that what we're supposed to take from this?
Yeah. Scott Rowland got in on the 6th ballot. He was last year. Um, Todd Helton was 72.2% in the previous year. So Helton and Rowland were each on the 5th ballot. This is Billy Wagner will only have one more year, and he was up at
Hmm.
72-ish%. So he'll
5 votes shy, apparently.
5 votes.
It was.
Okay, very,
Yeah.
very close. Beltran is his second. This is his second year, so he's gone up a little bit. He's gone up 11% from his first year. I think it's a little strange that the ballot system, like, oh, he's not good enough this year, but maybe next year we will. Or people who didn't vote him, because like you can vote for how many people can you vote for the Hall of Fame? I think you can vote for several. It's not like you
Yeah.
can't. You can vote for I think 10 maybe.
I'm not sure.
Yeah, I'm not sure how it. Um,
Yeah, it
how it.
wouldn't tell it. Yeah.
But Andrew
No more
Jones.
than 10.
No more than 10. So you can. I don't think anybody ever. I don't think anybody votes for 10 though.
and
Usually,
no write-in votes.
no write-in votes.
So you don't have to vote for anybody, I guess, technically, right? You just can't vote for more than 10.
Yeah. So in the 2024 Baseball Hall of Fame balloting, we have Adrian Beltre, Todd Helton, and Joe Mauer, and then we also have the Contemporary Baseball Committee was voting on managers and executives, and Jim Leland made it. Lou Piniella was fairly close, and Bill White, executive. I'm reading about Bill White. He was black, so one of the first. He played first base. He was also a broadcaster. He was president of the National League to replace Bart Giamatti, who became commissioner. He was National League president. So I guess he was the early black executive. So he had 62.5% of the vote in those voters. One of your favorites, umpire Joe West, was also on that ballot.
Cowboy Joe West.
He did not get it. He did not get enough votes to record percentage. But Jimmy Leland, the manager of the Marlins and the Tigers, Pirates, and he actually managed the Rockies for 1 year. I didn't remember that he managed the Rockies for 1 year.
Oh, I was going to ask you this question though too, related to Mauer. Do you think that Mauer's election makes it more likely that Salvador Perez will make it after he retires?
Ooh, well, I think it at least makes it more likely maybe that Yadier Molina might make it. I think Perez is as good as Mauer, but
Sal has more home run, almost has over 100 more home runs.
yeah, the defensive metrics hurt Sal usually.
He didn't have the high batting average totals. Like Mauer led the league in batting average 3 different times.
He has 5 Gold Gloves. So does I think Mauer had 5 Gold Gloves. Yeah, he led the league in home runs and RBIs 1 year. He has 1 World Series ring, which Mauer does not have. He does not have some of the individual accolades.
Yeah, Mauer only had 3 Gold Gloves.
Oh, Mauer had 3. I was thinking he had 5. Okay.
Sal has 5.
Hall of Fame Monitor has Sal at 75. Likely Hall of Famers around 100 in the so I don't know. I like Salvi as a Hall of Famer, but I don't know if he's
6 All-Stars for Mauer, 8 for Sal.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
I think the batting average and the on-base percentage hurts Salvi.
Yeah.
Slugging is very good for him, but yeah.
I just thought it would be kind of interesting if you thought that was if that made it more likely that Sal could get in then.
Yeah. Yadier Molina is a little bit higher in terms of he has a lot. His home runs are about the same as Mauer.
Or 4 more seasons for Molina
Yeah.
than Mauer. So 7 years right now than Sal.
Yeah. Molina never led the league in any statistical category.
Yeah.
You can say that Sal did. So and Sal has a few more years that he's going to play probably.
Right.
He's only, how old is Salvi?
33.
33. Okay, so he's almost 34. So he'll be 34 by the time the season starts. So 3 or 4 more years, you think Salvi will play?
Probably. He'll probably have like the same number of years as Mauer, or maybe 1 more.
So if he averages, he'll hit over 300 home runs probably if he averages about 20 a year. If he plays 3 more years, he'll be
Molina has 2 World
So,
Series rings. Sal 1, Mauer 0.
how many career walks does Salvador Perez have compared, and how many is
I'm sure Mauer has a lot more. 939 for Mauer.
Salvi has 199.
And most of it probably intentional.
Didn't Barry Bonds probably have more walks in a season than Salvi has in his career?
Probably. I'd be surprised if not.
Ooh, yes. Barry Bonds had a season of 232 walks at age 39. He also had a season of 198.
29 of Sal's walks were intentional. 29 to 199. He doesn't like to sit around. He wants to swing.
No, he's not gonna. 232 walks
In one season.
one season.
Unbelievable.
Yeah. Bonds had a 609 on base percentage that year.
It's ridiculous.
And he's not in the Hall of Fame because he's disliked and he's a steroid guy. But like that doesn't like all that's like his stats are just so out there. Like it's even if he was, there's still like everybody else was juicing at the same time. So it wasn't like he alone was
Yeah.
but he
still
was a
did
guy.
it.
Yeah, he was just a jerk. He was just kind of a jerk and nobody liked him. So that's also
Yeah.
why. But anyway, should we move on from the Hall of Fame and talk about this week's football matchups?
Yep.
The AFC Championship, the NFC Championship, in the American Football Conference at I believe 3 p.m. Eastern Time, 2 p.m. Central Time in Baltimore, Maryland, at M&T Bank Stadium. We have the Kansas City Chiefs at the Baltimore Ravens. The Ravens, I believe, right now are favored by 3.5 points, and the over/under in the game is 44.5. Dr. Scaff, who do you like in that game? And what about the over/under? What is your perceived? What are you going to bet? What do you see as the winning sides of these lines?
I can't pick against the Chiefs. I just can't do it. Especially when it's Baltimore. But I think the Chiefs defense is so strong that they're going to be able to. I mean, they just had the blueprint for Baltimore right in front of them, and they just faced Buffalo's probably the most similar team to Baltimore with the running quarterback. It's nice to have had that opportunity to play these two teams back to back, I think. So I do like the Chiefs in the game. I think it's even easier to make that pick that the Chiefs are the underdog. So, they don't technically have to win the spread bet, at least anyway, as long as it's that close within the field goal. But I expect them to win too. But I can't see Baltimore's like scoring like nothing essentially. So I'm gonna end up with the over, I think, in the game of 44.5. It's
Okay, well,
probably gonna be relatively close, but maybe upper 20s to mid 20s, somewhere in that area is what I would it's very similar to the Buffalo game, is what I would predict.
okay. I'm going to pick the Chiefs as well on the money line, and therefore also on the spread. I think the Chiefs. I don't know if the Chiefs are going to win or not, but I think they have a good chance of winning. And I think that even if they don't win, yeah, the 3.5 is a lot of points, I think, to me. And I've been going under with everything, but I'm going to actually switch to the over. So I'm going to agree with you on all three of these bets, just like we agreed on all three of them with the Chiefs Bills. I'm going to go with the over 44.5. I think partly I'm going over in really because the Chiefs offense has been playing better. And I think and playoff Chiefs offense can score, I'd say at least mid 20s to maybe 30 points. So I think that will probably,
Do you think they'd be in the 20s even if they don't play that well?
yeah. So I think a 31-24 game is not out of the question, something like that. So I like the over 44.5. The weather is supposed to be much better. It's supposed to be cool, like maybe 40s,
Oh
not
wow.
as cold as previously. So it's going to be good football weather. I think it's going to be conducive to scoring. I think both teams will score some points. We're talking about when the Chiefs play the Ravens, they usually put up a lot of points. They haven't played in a couple of years. They haven't played them with this defensive coordinator or this offensive coordinator. But I think they've got. I think they can. I think they can score on anybody. I don't think Baltimore's going to keep them down. So I think that the Chiefs defense could possibly, because I think their weakness is the run defense, could let Baltimore run on them. But I think the Chiefs aren't gonna not score points against Baltimore. So I like the over here.
Breaking your 10 straight under streak.
Yes. Do we want to make prop bets, or do we want to just go on to the
Yeah, maybe we should talk about, maybe we'll do the quarterback passing yards bets now, maybe.
okay, we can do
That.
rushing.
Yeah.
Okay. So quarterback passing yards, we have
I guess
Lamar Jackson.
we'll go through them all pretty quick anyway. It doesn't
Yeah.
matter.
We have Lamar Jackson at 210 and a half passing yards over under. What do you like on that one, Dr. Scaff? Or I can go first on one.
Yeah, I go
I'm
for him.
I'm gonna take the under on the passing. Lamar hasn't passed for that many yards. He didn't pass for that. He only passed for 150 or so yards against Houston. I think he's more of a running quarterback at this point. And I think the Chiefs, I think might dare him to pass by stacking the box and forcing him to run. But I still think he's going to be under. I don't expect. I think if the teams, I think if Baltimore's going to run, it's going to be the running backs that make most of the yardage, and I think that the passing is going to take a back seat. Mark Andrews might be back, but that's questionable. So I like the under for Jackson, under 210.5. How about you, Dr. Scaff?
If I had gone first, it would have been a really similar set of comments that were made there. Yeah, the low passing total in the previous game is probably the most important indicator, I think, for what to expect from him. And I can't see him getting to that 210 mark. I don't know that he was around 210 that often during the season. But that's, usually against lesser defenses than what the Chiefs are going to be bringing this week. So yeah, I agree. I'm going to also be taking the under in that one.
Yeah. So and then Mahomes is at 243.5. You get over under for Mahomes. I like the over for Mahomes. Mahomes has never the lowest total that Mahomes has had against the Ravens is actually 343 yards. He's passed for well over 300 yards each time he's played the Ravens. So 4 games, he's averaged about 365 yards a game, something like that. So he's always very pass happy against the Ravens. It's not a Wink Martindale defense anymore. It's a different defense. McDonald defense, but I still think the Chiefs are going to throw the ball often, and I think they're going to score points. So I like. He didn't have that many yards against Buffalo, but it was windy. The Chiefs didn't have the ball very much. Had the Chiefs, if the Chiefs have anywhere near to half 30 minutes of possession, I think Mahomes would have been well over 300 yards. So I think so I like over on this one.
Yeah, it looks like their Baltimore's defense on this season has only allowed about 192 yards per game, but that's usually not against. I mean, they play Pittsburgh twice. There are going to be a lot of teams like that in there.
And they play Cleveland with who knows who's the quarterback for Cleveland. They've played some mostly running teams, I think. So
yeah. Mahomes only didn't throw for quite that many yards last week. He was around what, 220 or so?
yeah, but they didn't have the ball very much, and
So
yeah, it was,
the risk is that if Baltimore tries to run a similar offense and time of possession to bleed the clock and keep Mahomes, the ball away from Mahomes, then we may be in that situation. But 243 still seems to be attainable, though, even if he doesn't have the ball for all that much. I have a hard time taking the under. It's just tough to do that when it's not that high. If it was like 300 yards, it'd be like, oh, maybe. But 243.5, I think you got to take the over on that one.
Okay.
We're not disagreeing too much here, Mike.
No, no. How about let's let you go first on these then. So we'll go to rushing yard props. So let's go back to Lamar. Lamar Jackson is over under 64.5 rushing yards. Do you think Lamar Jackson will have more than 64.5 rushing yards or fewer?
So I think he went over 100 or right at 100 last week. Let's see, Josh Allen was under 100, but would have been over the 64.5. And he ran a lot last week. I think the Chiefs defense with Lamar Jackson, I think they're going to be honed in on the run. I don't think he's maybe running quite as much as he has in the last couple of seasons. I think maybe I'm going to take the under on Lamar Jackson rush yards.
64.5. I'd like to take the under, have them both under passing and under rushing.
Yeah. If that happens, the Chiefs are probably in good shape.
Win, I think. Maybe this is a total homer bet for me. I think Jackson is going to be under 64.5. I think the most of the damage, I think if there is damage in the running game, I think it's going to be running backs that are going to do it. So I'm partly thinking that if the Ravens run it well, it's not going to be Jackson running wild, because I think in some ways Allen is a more difficult to contain runner than Jackson is. He's not as fast as Jackson, but he is bigger and harder to tackle. And I think Jackson is also more willing to go down and not risk injury in the way that maybe Allen doesn't care, especially in the playoffs. So I think I tend to think that I'm going to think under for Jackson, 64.5. Jackson had less than 1,000 yards rushing in the regular season, so he averaged fewer than 64.5 yards per game in the regular season. So I'm gonna say he's gonna have maybe 50s, maybe fewer. I don't know. I think they're gonna try to contain Lamar and try to make him pass, or I think hand the ball off to somebody else and have that running back beat the Chiefs rather than Jackson. So I think it's gonna be, if there's success running them. So maybe I'm hedging a little bit here, because I think if he's not running the ball, maybe he's passing it more. But I don't know if he was going to go over on both. So I'm going to do under on the rushing for Lamar Jackson.
Again, agreeing. So this is our most agreeable betting lines, I think, so far. But that's not really that surprising, I think, as the we've honed our picks down to this point.
Yes,
the whole season, and we're probably more agreeable than we normally would be otherwise.
So Isaiah Pacheco has 66.5 rushing yards is his over under. Do you think Pacheco makes it or not?
Well, I think his rushing yard totals have been creeping up as the season has gone on. Ended up just shy of 100 yards in the last game on only 15 carries. They're probably going to be using him pretty heavily, I think, in the game, at least early on. And then depending on how successful he is, that they'll keep giving him the ball, or they'll have to move to something else. It's hard to not be a homer, though. Again, Mike, I think I'm going to go with the over.
Okay, I would like to see the over from Pacheco. I'm actually going to go with the under. I think the Chiefs are going to be passing it more than running it. I don't think Pacheco will have enough carries. I don't think it'll matter. I think maybe he might get, I think he'll maybe have more stuff out of the backfield.
Yeah.
So I hope he gets over, but and partly just be different from you. I'm just going to go under with Pacheco here. So I think under. I think Pacheco I think he's going to have a good game, and I think the Chiefs are going to play well. But I think maybe they aren't going to have to rely on him as much as they would in the colder, windier weather in Buffalo. So Pacheco, of course, could break some big runs and get over, but I think I think the under here. I think he's probably just going to be a change. They're going to run as a change of pace rather than as a primary option. So I'm going to go under with Pacheco on 66.5. So, and then we have Patrick Mahomes, who we put in there as well for his rushing totals, 26.5 yards. I believe he had 32 yards scrambling, but some of those were taken away. He had more yards than that rushing, but he had several kneel downs that probably cost him 4, 5, 6, 7, 8 yards total. But I think he ended up with 32 yards on the ground. So this is 26.5. Do you think he's going to be over or under 26.5 in the game?
I think I like that scenario though, as at least as an amusement. I could see him being at 28 yards and then having 3 kneel downs at the end of the game, to drive it back under. I think I'm going to take the under in this one. I could see him scrambling a lot though too, but I think I'm going to take the under just because.
Okay. I feel like that too. He could go under because of the kneel downs, but I think also he might stay over because this is playoff Patrick Mahomes, and he tends to run the ball more in the playoffs. Absolutely. So I'm gonna say he's over, and even if he has to kneel down at the end, I think he stays over. They haven't had the dramatic long, like remember the end of the Super Bowl against the 49ers when he kneeled down. He didn't just kneel it down like a yard back. He went like 5 or 6, 7 yards back, and so really kneeled it far. But I hope he doesn't do that this time. So I'm going to say he's maybe 40, 50 yards on the ground. So I'm going to say he's over. So we differ on those two.
There we go.
Pacheco under, Mahomes over. I think we both want the Chiefs to win, and I don't know if we really think the Chiefs are going to win or we just want them to win. So we think that they have a chance to win. So we're both picking them and them kind of across the board in this game. How maybe we might have more differences though with Detroit, San Francisco in that game, the NFC Championship game, which is at 5:30 p.m. Arrowhead Central Time, 6:30 p.m. Eastern Time. Detroit at San Francisco. You might remember that you won't remember this, Stuck Your Scaff, but maybe you will. In the 1957 was the last year Detroit won the championship. That was the NFL championship at that point, and they actually had to defeat San Francisco I believe, on the road in the championship game to win that season. So if Detroit wants to go to the Super Bowl, they will have to defeat the 49ers in San Francisco, or at least near San Francisco. This is Santa Clara now that they play it. Right. The Lions are 7-point underdogs to the 49ers, and the over-under in the game is 50.5. Who do you like in this one?
So last time I thought San Francisco would cover easily, and they didn't. They had to win in a very tight game. Detroit's has been kind of slipping as the season's gone on, but they're still in this position. I kind of feel like I want to hedge the bet on this a little bit. I think I will take Detroit to keep it close, but San Francisco on the money line. And I think that the defense of San Francisco is strong enough that they can keep that under the 50.5 total. But it may be that, Deebo Samuel, if he doesn't play, then they may be limited a bit too. So that may, improve that under odds a little bit. So I'm going to say Detroit to cover, San Francisco on the money line, and the under 50.5.
Okay. I also will take San Francisco on the money line. I think San Francisco is going to win. I also think San Francisco is going to. I think San Francisco is a lot better than Detroit. Even maybe if Deebo doesn't play, I think they're still a stronger team. It's at home. I think San Francisco is going to want to show out better than they did against Green Bay. I think Green Bay also might be a better team at this point than Detroit. So I like Detroit somewhat, but I don't think they're going to. I think they can keep it within a couple touchdowns, but I don't think they're going to cover. I don't think they're going to cover the 7. So I like San Francisco at -7. I also like them to have the money line. I think I also like the under in this game. I think actually the Chiefs Ravens game will be higher scoring than the 49ers Lions game. So I like the under 50.5. I think partly because I think it's going to be Detroit not scoring very many points. So I think 28-14 type of game is in the cards, something like that. So I like to keep Detroit from getting enough points, and maybe with that debuff, like you said, maybe they aren't going to score enough points to push it over by themselves. So I like the under 50 and a half. So should you want to move on to the props?
Let's do it.
Okay, so passing yards, we have two quarterbacks, Brock Purdy and Jared Goff. Brock Purdy's over under is 272 and a half. Do you like Purdy to have the over or the under in passing yards, 272 and a half?
I think this is almost right on what he had in the last game, and he didn't really play really all that well. I think Detroit may be a weaker opponent almost than what they faced last week. I think I'd take the over for Purdy, 2.5.
I'm gonna take the under for Purdy here. I think the 49ers aren't going to be as prolific on offense, at least passing offense. I think they'll probably rely on Christian McCaffrey more, and maybe more as a running back than as receiver. So I'm going to say Purdy under 272 and a half. And then we have Goff 255 and a half. Do you like him over or under?
It's not a terribly high number, but San Francisco's defense is really strong. They have been, at least anyway. But there's always that chance that it's going to be kind of a shootout type of game. There's probably going to be a lot of passing. It doesn't take that many decently length passes to get to that 255 number. I think I'm going to take the over on his passing yards as well.
Okay, I think I'm going to do the over on Goff as well. I think partly because I think he might get like a lot of garbage time yards when they're trying to come. Like if San Francisco gets out to a lead, then I think the Lions are going to have to pass it a lot, and I think he can get over 255. And Baker Mayfield got 350 yards almost against the Lions last game. I think that Goff might get close to 300 against the 49ers. Simply because they're trying to play catch up, and sometimes you get a lot of passing yards when your team is not ahead and you have to throw it. So I'm gonna say over as well on Goff, and that leads us to the rushing totals. We have 4 prop bets on this one, 1 with the 49ers and 3 with the Lions. Let's do Christian McCaffrey first. You think McCaffrey is over or under 84.5 yards rushing in the game?
I think that's a pretty high total for the rushing yards. I think maybe since I also picked Purdy to pick the over on his passing yards, that maybe more of these yards come for McCaffrey as a receiver, maybe than as a running back. Maybe opposite of what you were guessing in the previous segment there. So I think I'm going to take the under on McCaffrey rushing yards, but I think his full total yards from scrimmage may be quite a bit higher than this.
Okay, I'm guys, like I mean I hinted at earlier. I think McCaffrey's going to have a lot of yards on the ground. I think he's going to have over 100 yards on the ground. So I think I'm going to have him as over 84.5. Of course, probably now he's going to simply just be a receiving threat in the field and not run the ball very much, or it's going to be all handoffs to Kyle Juszczyk instead, or one of the backups. But I like the over for McCaffrey at 84.5.
And then the reason why there are 3 different prop bets on Detroit, though, is because they really do running back by committee.
Yeah, we have a split really between Jahmyr Gibbs and David Montgomery. Gibbs is 47.5 as his over under. Montgomery is 46.5 as his over under. Why don't we do these together? Gibbs and Montgomery. What do you think of Gibbs? What do you think of Montgomery's possibilities?
So neither of the running totals are not that terribly high anyway. So together, yeah, chances are one of them is going to go over this, but not both. They tend to get like almost identical number of attempts, which makes this one really tricky. So yeah, from the betting perspective, that makes it even trickier then. So if you pick one to go over, one to go under, then you're probably going to miss both of them or get them both right. So probably the hedge way to do it is to bet both of them the same way, and then you'll get one of them right. So I think I'm going to take them both on the under side and then make them go over to beat me, I guess, is pretty much what I'm thinking with this one.
Always under until it's over. I'm actually going the same way as you. I'm going both under, probably for a different reason, because I think that the Lions are going to be behind and that they're not going to run the ball very much, or they're going to have to throw the ball. And I think it's possible that both of those guys would have a decent number of yards out of the backfield, but maybe not as much rushing the ball. So I'm going to go both under, but I think that's because I think Goff is going to make most of his yardage throwing the ball because he has to, and that they're going to maybe abandon the run in the second half. And so maybe they'll both be under. So I'm going to pick both under as well. And also, I think I like the idea that you had that maybe one's going to get over, but I don't think both are going to get over. So at least I'll get 50-50 right.
Yeah.
And I think the under is more likely to get both than the over is likely to get both. So I like the under on both.
Especially since both backs also do receive the ball too. Like they don't it's not like they only use one of them on third down opportunities where they're more likely to catch a pass than be handed the ball. So it's I think it is so much by committee that in the last game even Gibbs had one fewer carry than Montgomery, but also had one more catch than Montgomery. So they were like identical number of touches in the game. So it is very evenly split there. How they
Gibbs had more yardage, right? He had
Gibbs had more yards on both types of touches. That
yeah. Well, the last one I think is the one we're all waiting for is the over under on Jared Goff rushing yards, and that is 1.5 rushing yards for Goff. Goff is a fairly statuesque pocket passer. He does not run the ball unless he absolutely, positively is being chased from behind, I believe. So he's looking to throw the ball or throw the ball away or hand the ball off. He's not looking to run it himself usually. But that explains the very, very low line, 1.5. Sacks, of course, do not count in the rushing yards. So if Goff runs the ball at all, it's likely he will be over 1.5. But he doesn't run it very much. Do you know how many rushing yards on the year Goff has?
I only know how many yards he had in the last game because that's what I have open on my screen over here right now. And he carried the ball 6 times last week for a total of 6 yards, Mike. Although he did have a 7-yard run. So
Well, Goff has 21 total rushing yards in the 2023 season, if you include the regular season.
Which is almost exactly a 1.5 yard average.
Yes.
Very
so
close,
he had,
very close.
Goff had -3 yards on 3 carries against the Rams. I think those involved 3 kneel downs.
Yes.
And he had 6 yards and 6 carries, as you said, against Tampa Bay. So he's averaged 1.5 yards per game in the playoffs. He's averaged a little under 1.5 yards in the regular season. Only 5 games has he gone over 1.5 in the regular season. So I'm actually going to go under. I think the odds is he's going to be under rather than over.
I'm glad you picked first on this one because I would have wanted to take the opposite of whatever you did in this one because this one really is just like a coin flip. It doesn't really there's not really a lot of logic behind it because it's like, well, if he has 1 carry for 5 yards, like it's actually still not a guarantee that he'll stay over it. If they had the lead and they have to kneel down, like it might actually get back down underneath that 1.5. So I'll take the over and say that maybe he gets a couple of yard carry, but then they don't win the game. So he doesn't have the kneel downs,
Yes. So so Goff's high on the season is 10 yards in a game. His low is that -3 in the playoffs. He's had a few -2s. His last 5 regular season games were all 0 yards rushing.
He don't really plan for anything. He doesn't need to.
Yeah, I'm gonna say so. I like the under. You're going with the over. So we've got a few differences there. More differences with that game than we have with the Chiefs Ravens game, but it's going to be an exciting weekend of football either way. You have any final thoughts on this weekend?
Uh, how nervous are you right now? Are you at the full nervousness, or are you like ramping up, or are you fully confident right now? That's all.
I'm sure I'll be more nervous as the week goes on, but I'm probably less nervous. In some ways, I was less nervous watching the Buffalo game is because I think the Chiefs aren't as good this year, and they won the Super Bowl last year, so they are still, I think, sitting pretty in a lot of ways, and so they're playing with house money, I think, at this point.
Oh,
And I think most people didn't expect them to get this far because of their offensive woes, and so I can see them losing to Baltimore, but I wouldn't I wouldn't be that surprised, but I also it would be I think very happy that if they won. I think the winner of the AFC Championship game is going to win the Super Bowl, especially the way San Francisco has been looking the last several weeks. I think if they
yeah.
had played San Francisco of like week 9, week 10, week 11, that would be a different story. But the 49ers have been a little bit down. I don't think the Lions are in the league of either the Chiefs or the Ravens, even though they did beat the Chiefs early on, but that was kind of a fluke game, I think, in the first game of the season. The Ravens have actually played both of the teams, the Lions and the 49ers, and beat them both quite handily.
Mhm.
So, I think I wouldn't see that as a big surprise happening again if they played again. So I like the winner. I think the AFC, as we talked about at the beginning of the season, we thought the AFC was the stronger conference.
Mhm.
And it's really turned out to be that way in the playoffs, where we see like the like there've been like some of the teams we thought were going to be pretty good in the NFC, like Philadelphia and Dallas, both turned out to be pretty weak, and the powers of the AFC, I think, the Bills, the Chiefs, the Ravens, have looked stronger, and the 49ers even have looked pretty weak in their in their first game. So it's been an interesting result. And I think when the Ravens did that to the 49ers, it also kind of showed maybe how good the AFC was compared to the NFC, even if the Chiefs were kind of having iffy times against their NFC opponents this year. But
Yeah.
but I think they played them somewhat when the teams were better. I think the Eagles were still a strong team when the Chiefs played the Eagles, but they should have won that game, but they lost barely. They should have beaten the Lions as well, and they lost that one. So it's one of those things where I think the Chiefs were playing poorly when the other teams were playing well, and now I think the AFC teams like the Chiefs are playing well, and I think maybe the NFC teams are playing a little bit worse. So
Really, I think, yeah, for the Chiefs, the season really started now. It's like this is really where what they've been playing for all season was just that they had to get through the regular season so that they could get to these games. And that really is how they looked on the field too. And that's just what we've talked about their mentality, but you know, that doesn't always play out the way you think it's going to. And
yeah, and
you
can
look
you
at
just
it.
turn the switch on like that or not? It's a difficult thing, but so far the Chiefs have looked like they could. They've won. Their offense has been pretty good, and I think So I know I'm hoping for a win in Baltimore. I'm not expecting a win in Baltimore, but I'm not expecting a loss either. So I'm just kind of I don't know, and that makes me and I'm less nervous because I was more nervous last year than I was this year because the
Yeah.
Chiefs maybe because they won last year and they've already won 2 Super Bowls in the last 4 years, so I think they've done pretty well. And this is sort of a down year, and they're still in the championship. So
6 straight times.
straight times. Um, we've done this podcast slash YouTube channel for many more than 6 straight times. We've done it for who knows how many straight weeks now, at least probably 23, 24 straight weeks at
At
least.
least, yeah. I don't
Um,
think we didn't miss anything during the NFL season.
so we're on a roll. Hopefully, the listeners are also on a roll, listening to us or watching our YouTube channel, and are excited about this weekend's games. This is maybe Sunday is maybe the most exciting game of the NFL season because there are two big games that are taking place, and we hope if you have a rooting interest that your team wins. unless it's the Baltimore Ravens, which we want the Chiefs to win. But other than that, we wish you luck in your bets and your rooting. And should we? I think we're about ready to sign off, aren't we, Dr. Scaff?
I think so.
Well, as always, I am Dr. Michael Werman, Esquire. He, as always, is Dr. Andrew Scaff, Esquireless. And we are the Warning Track Power Hour. Please like and or subscribe to our YouTube channel or our podcast, which is on various platforms. And we appreciate your listenership, your patronage, and we also wish you a good day.